We have lots to discuss in today's video, including the latest trade rumors around the NHL. Today's rumor mill focusing on teams like the Montreal Canadiens, Anaheim Ducks, Ottawa Senators, Vancouver Canucks, and the Buffalo Sabres. Plus, we also have a trade that went down, a small trade involving prospects between the Penguins and the Blues earlier today. We also have some updates on the Four Nation Face-Off tournament. We had our first game last night, which turned out to be a really solid game going into overtime between Canada and Sweden. And plus, we had our first injury of the tournament. And we'll preview tonight's second game of the tournament between the United States and Finland. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here, Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to discuss here in today's video. First up, I want to start with a small trade that happened earlier this afternoon. The Pittsburgh Penguins and the St. Louis Blues connected together on a deal involving some minor league prospects. The Pittsburgh Penguins traded prospect Corey Andonovski to the St. Louis Blues for Matthias Laferriere. Of course, Andonovski is a 25-year-old undrafted player, where Laferriere is a 24-year-old sixth-round draft pick, formerly of the Blues, and drafted back in 2018. So neither player at this point has played in the NHL games. So we'll see if a change in scenery, change in organizations will help anything along in that case. So the Penguins get Laferriere, whereas the Blues get Andonovski. So that trade went down earlier. I do suspect sometime over this break we're going to get some bigger activity as well, just based on what we had heard. It's unlikely going to get any big deals announced when there's Four Nation tournament games. But the tournament did kick off last night, and to be honest, I don't know what everybody else thought. I thought it was a terrific game last night between Canada and Sweden. I thought it was extremely well done. Of course, yesterday we talked about the press conference that happened beforehand with Gary Bettman, Marty Walsh, Bill Daly, and Ron Hainsey of the PA, talking about a lot of good positive things coming out of that. So we're going to be getting these types of tournaments, except in different formats, moving forward on a regular basis. The next World Cup of Hockey will be in 2028, and is expected to be 8 nations minimum, perhaps more. So we'll see how things go on that front. But for last night, I thought Canada and Sweden put on a terrific game. Of course, Montreal, the Bell Center, one of the best places to watch a hockey game. The crowd was phenomenal. I thought they did a terrific job setting up the game. Of course, they had the ceremonial face-off to kick things off, brought out lots of big names. They had the captains for Finland and the U.S., Barkov and Matthews there. The crowd went nuts when they brought out Canadian legend Muriel Lemieux. Lemieux got a terrific ovation. I was a little surprised even they brought out Daniel Alfredsson, of course, who was one of the coaches with the Swedish team, given his connection to Ottawa, who's obviously a Montreal rival. He got a little bit of boos, but mostly cheered. Matthews was booed pretty hardcore, which didn't really come as a huge surprise. But I just thought it was extremely well done. They did a good job of getting everything ready to roll. The game was solid. Penalty to Sweden in the first minute goes to William Nylander, who accidentally got his stick up in the face of, I can't remember which Canadian player it was, but I think it was McKinnon, if I'm not mistaken. Nylander got his stick up, goes to the penalty box, and that lethal Canadian power play that everybody was anxious to see how it would work, scored, and they scored pretty much in record time. Of course, we had McKinnon, Crosby, McDavid, Makar, and Reinhart. And once they got set up in the zone, it was pretty much back and forth between McDavid and Crosby. And Crosby, of course, with the backhand no-look pass to McKinnon through the seam into the net. It was phenomenal. It was scored in record time. I know as Canadian fans, we've been waiting to see what that would look like for so long. So that was certainly fun as well. So the power play was amazing. It was the only opportunity that they got. And they had a very dominant first period. Sweden barely got a shot on net. But the Swedish team did kind of settle in and play better as the period went along. Second period was a little bit better. It was 3-1 Canada after 2 periods of play, with Stone and Marchand already getting goals as well outside of the McKinnon power play goal. But then Sweden did end up coming back to tie the game. They would not go away. They were playing a solid game. Gustafsson held them in it. And then we ended up going to overtime. And the one difference between regular overtime here in this tournament compared to the NHL is that the 3-on-3 period is 10 minutes before you go to a shootout. Now, that'll be for all games except the championship game, which will be standard NHL overtime that you see in the playoffs. But, for 10 minutes, and it didn't go 10 minutes, but it went, I believe it was more than 5. I think we were into the 6th minute or so when Mitch Marner gets the Canadian goal for the overtime winner, assisted from Sidney Crosby. It was kind of a unique play where Crosby enters the zone and then he flings it right back, big time hard drop pass way out of the zone to Marner, and of course Crosby then circles and enters out of the zone just in time for Marner to come in, and he goes in and shoots and scores. Crosby was actually had one leg over the bench starting to change when he get the shot off. So certainly a big night. I know before that goal, Mitch Marner, I think it's fair to say, didn't have a great game. I know looking and following along on social media on X throughout the night, a lot of people were giving it to Marner, not thrilled with Marner and Binnington's performance. But you know what? Marner, I think, hopefully quieted everybody down with that big overtime goal. And even though Binnington probably would have liked one or two of those goals back, he made some huge saves in overtime. And when it mattered most, he was there. But I do think it's fair to say that with his performance, that the Canadian team does have a dilemma on their hands. Do they continue with that and continue to let Binnington run the net here? Or do they consider going to a guy like Adin Hill for their Saturday game against the United States? It's going to be curious to see. Based on comments from head coach John Cooper, it didn't sound like they wanted to get into a rotational situation, and it was basically going to be Binnington's net. However, that's assuming he played well enough to keep it. And yes, they got the win, but did he play well enough in the coaching staff's eyes to stay there? That's going to be the big question we see. Of course, we saw our first injury of the tournament as well with Canadian defenseman from Vegas, Shea Theodore, going down with a wrist injury. It's an innocent-looking play, bumped into the boards and just seemed to go in awkwardly, I guess. He's considered week to week, and he's done for the tournament. So at this point, Canada, obviously has an extra D with Travis Sanheim of the Flyers, who was not dressed last night. He'll be in the lineup when they play the Americans on Saturday. But at this point, they can't replace anybody on the roster. The rosters are submitted and are set. Now, of course, the NHL does not really want to see a team play shorthanded in these situations, which is why the roster sizes are what they are. So at this point, every team has an extra D and an extra forward in case something is to happen. But based on a number of reporters kind of digging through the rules and conferring with the NHL, essentially for Canada, how this will work is if another defenseman gets hurt, they're allowed to bring another defenseman in. They have to have under 6 healthy D. So the last thing you want to see is another injury. But if it does happen, they can bring somebody in. Now, what they apparently have done, because of the injury, they have contacted Dallas Stars defenseman Thomas Harley, and he is basically going to be on standby. Now, their next game, they have their 6D, which is going to be slated to play in Montreal against the United States. They will play their third and final game of the round-robin portion of the tournament on the following Monday in Boston. So at the earliest that Harley could be needed would be for that game against Finland. That's assuming, hopefully we don't see any injuries against the U.S., but if there are any and they need a defenseman, he could be available for that. So essentially he's not allowed to practice with the team. He's not allowed to skate with the team. He's not allowed to take part in anything that's team related, but he's allowed to be on standby and be in the general area. So he'll fly to Boston, get a hotel, and be close to them with all his gear and everything and be ready to go just in case. I would imagine, I'm not sure if Harley was their first choice. I know a lot of players, of course, that are not going to be in this tournament had vacations booked and are looking forward to the break, especially, guys that have, families and whatnot, to get some family time and get away. So, certainly I'm not sure if they had to go through a number of players or whatever to see who could even come and who would be available. So I don't know if he's their first choice. He's a really good defenseman, so by all means, if he gets called into action, they'll be in good shape. But that's how things are going to roll here with this tournament. So tonight, like I said, the U.S. will take on Finland. This video probably will make it onto YouTube shortly after the game starts. We have UC Saros against Connor Hellebuck. The Finnish blue line is certainly the questionable piece here for the team. They have a good group of forwards, but they already had a number of injuries to their D-core before they could even get started, so certainly not quite the depth of other teams. So by many consider Finland to be the weakest team in the tournament because of that, especially because of the defense. But we'll see. They have a great goaltender and they have some great forwards. Be interesting tonight if they can give the U.S. a run for their money, or if will the U.S. pull away. I'd be curious to see. Of course, last night it's because it's a 3-2-1 point system, so Canada got 2 points for an overtime win. If the U.S. gets a regulation win, they'll move into first place, or whoever. If Finland, the same thing goes for them. So we will see. So Sweden has 1 point for an overtime loss. Canada has 2 for an overtime win. If the U.S., for example, were to beat Finland in regulation, then they would go to 3. Finland would be at 0, so it would be 3-2-1-0. And then, of course, that would be waiting for all teams to play their second game on Saturday. So it could be interesting, depending on how things go with Canada and the United States, regardless of who wins. If they win in regulation or overtime, will play a big role. Of course, the Sweden-Finland game could be interesting. Like, it's not a given that anybody's going to the final here. It's going to come right down to it, I think, for those last games in Boston on Monday. Now, as I mentioned, we also have some other news around the league. Jordan Eberle, the captain of the Seattle Kraken, who's been out for an extended time with injury, has been assigned to the American Hockey League here while they're on break for the Four Nation tournament. He's going down on a conditioning stint, so that tells us that he's obviously getting close to being able to return. So we'll see if Eberle can be ready when the team comes back after the Four Nation break here later this month. In the rumor mill, lots of teams obviously looking to make deals here before the trade deadline. There's not a lot of games to be played after the teams return from break, which is why we're expecting to be at least a little bit of activity here on the trade front while the teams are off. Wouldn't be surprised if we see something in the next couple of days here. But for right now, one team that's being heavily scouted, or was heavily scouted leading into the break, was Montreal. Their last couple of games after falling out of the race, the number of scouts has been really increased a lot because they have some interesting pieces that they're expected to probably sell regardless. Even if they have a decent little stretch when they come back from the break, they have a bigger mountain to climb now. Being when you're 6-7 points out and you've got 3-4 teams to climb over with 25 games, 26 games left, that's a big job. It might not sound like a lot, but it is. So they do have a big mountain to climb. Doesn't mean it's impossible, but the odds are against them. So at this point, one thing to watch with Montreal is they were being heavily scouted going into the break by the Vegas Golden Knights. Now, they had multiple scouts at multiple games here. It's believed that, the speculation here is that they might be looking at a variety of their players because with Vegas, they do have a lot of scoring, but their penalty kill hasn't been great, and it's been been struggling as of late, and looking for some reinforcements on kind of the defensive side of the puck and for the PK. So they could be looking at a variety of players. When it comes to Montreal, as I mentioned before, you got Jake Evans, you got Joel Armia, and you've also got David Savard. Now, I would think that a D, like Savard to Vegas is probably less likely. I would say that Evans or Armia, or maybe both now. Of course, the Shea Theodore injury could play a role here. If he ends up right now, they're calling him week to week, but if you think about it, like if he ends up, out, 4, 5, 6 weeks, like he could be out to right around playoffs. They could suddenly have some more LTIR options in front of them. So it might make acquiring a couple of these guys more likely. Now, of course, like I said, we don't know the full extent of the injury. There's some speculation, though, that it could be a scenario where he might miss all or the bulk of the regular season, but that's not confirmed here as of yet. But right now, you can throw Vegas's name in the hat here for teams that have been watching Montreal and have interest in some of their pending UFAs like Armia and Evans. Now, Cam Robinson of the Elite Prospects, he put out his own trade bait board today as well. I noticed lately that he's trying to be a little bit more of an NHL insider. Obviously talks to a lot of people around the NHL, certainly has lots of connections. I would say it's probably fair to say that he's not as well connected as, a guy like an Elliot Friedman or, a Darren Dreger or Frank Saravalli, but he is a connected person with a lot of a lot of people that he talks to. So he's decided to put out his own trade bait board for elite prospects, which is a great website for prospect info, which is more his specialty. But a couple of names to watch that he's put out on his list, which we've kind of talked about in some degree before, but he really feels that the Ducks are likely to trade Trevor Zegras. And at this point, he says it's just time. Clearly this is a skilled player that needs a change of scenery. He mentions a number of teams obviously that could be looking for this type of skill. And at the Ducks, if they do move Zegras, they're rumored to be wanting a defenseman that really moves the needle, which to me is surprising. And they have a lot of good young defensemen. Maybe they don't see any of these guys as being, a true number one. Maybe not. I'm not sure. I mean, they've got Mityukov and Zellweger, and there's a few others. They've got some interesting young D back there. They have the potential, and it seems like they've been a D factory for a long time. They a lot of defensemen around the NHL have come through Anaheim. You get Cam Fowler that was just moved. Hampus Lindholm. At one point they had Lindholm and Fowler and Sammy Vatanen, and they've just been a factory. And then those guys leave, and look at the next guys that come through there. And now they've got a bunch more of young defensemen as well. So they already moved Drysdale, and they have like I said, a few others. But do they not see them as being a true one? Maybe they want something higher ranked. Would Zegras for, Noah Dobson be something that would be considered? I mean, Noah Dobson, I'm not sure that the Islanders really want to trade him. His name has been out there, and we've discussed that he's only in certain scenarios. But, if they were willing to include him for a deal like Pettersson, would they consider a deal like Zegras? I mean, I would think Pettersson's ceiling is higher than Zegras, so maybe not, hard to say. But at the end of the day, he also mentions, Robinson does, Chicago maybe being an option for Trevor Zegras as well. That the Blackhawks definitely would want some help for Connor Bedard, which we know, and of course we know Zegras can play center. It could help with their center depth. It could move him to the wing. Either way, it could be a fit there, but what, needle-moving defenseman are they going to get from the Blackhawks? That's the only problem, right? So we will see where that goes. But Trevor Zegras, to me, I totally agree, could be a player that is moved. If he's not moved to the deadline, I'd be shocked if we go through another offseason where he's not traded. Now, it mentions Brock Boeser of Vancouver. Now, there's other Vancouver players on his list as well, but we're going to focus more on Boeser here today. He mentions 4 teams that he feels would be that he's linking to this player. We know Brock Boeser at this point has had little to no conversations with the Canucks around a contract extension, and it sure sounds like the odds are very favorable that he is going to be traded. At least that's the kind of the belief around the league. You never know. I mean, maybe they change their mind and they make an offer that sounds good to Boeser and he stays, but things are not trending that way right now. He mentions LA Kings as being a potential team in the West, but 3 Eastern teams were more in that conversation, including the Devils, the Red Wings, and the Senators. Now, I mentioned before, teams like Ottawa and Detroit that are in the wildcard race, I think that you need to see, if you're Steve Yzerman or Steve Staios, you need to bring in reinforcements for those teams. They've done well to get themselves in the conversation. The fact that they're holding a spot, at this 4-nation break is quite an accomplishment, but they need some reinforcements and some extra help to make sure they get over the hump. And if Detroit and Ottawa could both get in the playoffs this year from the Atlantic Division, would be a huge jump. I mean, it would be nice to see them both get back in after an extended absence. And certainly, like I said, I predicted before, at the beginning of the year, I said I thought we were going to get 5 teams from the Atlantic and 3 from the Metro. And that very well right now is starting to trend that way. It's not a given. Columbus could kind of foil their plans. I think they're one team that could do it. Maybe the Rangers, but I don't know how much faith I have in them right now. But the Islanders, I think, will fall back. But we'll see. I mean, a team like Ottawa and Detroit would be great for Boeser. Doesn't mean he signs there long term. I mean, in Ottawa's case, they've got a lot of American players, and I know, for the most part, they're all signed long term, majority of them. So clearly, there's no issues with them playing in Canada, playing in Ottawa. I don't know what Boeser's plans are, but the thing is, too, is they've been playing such a sound defensive style game of hockey. They need to be careful, in particular, in who they bring in, so that they don't kind of mess up how they play in that rate, but they need to add more goals, too. So we'll see. I mean, clearly Travis Green is the other connection to Brock Boeser here, having coached him before, so familiar face behind the bench might be intriguing to Boeser, might be intriguing for Green to talk to the Senators about maybe looking to make that acquisition as well. But like I said, they're by far not the only team that's, that he's linked here, but an interesting one to me, no doubt. Bo Byram in Buffalo is another name that's on this list, a name we've touched on before. It seems like, according to Cam here, more likely that we see a Byram trade instead of like Power or Dahlin. I don't think too many people think Dahlin's going anywhere, but there has been some questions around Power, thinking that maybe they trade Power and sign Byram. But the belief here is that Bo Byram really wants an opportunity, believes he could be a number one defenseman, and wants to ideally sign long-term with a team who can put him in that kind of role. Not that he doesn't like Buffalo, but he wants a chance to have a bigger spot and feels he can be a true top pair D, and he wants to be paid as such, and he's probably not going to get that kind of money in Buffalo, given that they already have Power and Dahlin with that kind of money. Obviously, at the same time, moving contracts like that become challenging, but those are two really good defensemen that if they were to be put on the market, I honestly don't think they'd have that difficult of a time getting that to play out. Now, we had linked before guys like Byram and Cousins maybe being packaged up for Pettersson in Vancouver. Again, I don't think Vancouver's a good landing spot for Byram. I really don't. He's not going to get what he wants there. I don't think he's going to sign long term. With Quinn Hughes there, he's not going to have any chance to be the top defenseman. He's probably going to be a number 3. So that to me doesn't quite work. You look around the league, it's kind of difficult to say exactly where he goes. He's probably going to have to go to a team that's, a team that's on the rise, a team that could benefit from having an upgrade on the blue line. So we'll have to wait and see where things go, but certainly the Sabres defenseman is a name that, many expect could be on the move, with the Sabres being down and out of the playoffs here yet again. I do expect some more retooling, and obviously that defenseman hasn't, at this point, it just seems unlikely to see a long-term fit for what the team and player both want, so a trade does seem to make sense. But it would be difficult to say where he goes at this point, but there's lots of teams that are going to be interested. He's a dynamic defenseman and could make a lot of teams better for sure, no doubt. So let me know your thoughts on all of today's news and rumors down in the comments, so we'll discuss further. Let me know your thoughts and predictions as well for the Big Four Nation tournament game tonight between the U.S. and Finland. Let me know who you think will win or who also will be player of the game. Certainly tough to top or match the Crosby performance last night for Canada, but lots of great talented players that'll be on the ice trying to do so. Let me know your thoughts, and we'll discuss further. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.